In the turmoil of life, when chaos reigns and our hearts quake with fear, there lies a path, to lean not on our own understanding, but to grasp hold of that which is unseen and steadfast. In every fierce wind, in every crashing wave, in every night so dark that even the stars hide their faces, there is an invitation to trust beyond what our eyes can perceive, to anchor our souls in something immutable. When a storm overtakes you, whether it be the loss of what you held dear, the shattering of your plans, the betrayal of those you loved, the heavy weight of shame and remorse, look past the thunderclap of doubt and the torrential downpour of despair. Hope is not found in the shifting sands of circumstance, neither is it tethered to the fragile architecture of man's promises. True reassurance stands apart from these. It is found in the whisper of ancient strength, in the echo of endless mercy, in the pulse of unfading light. You cannot see the one who beckons you to trust. You cannot map every twist and turn of the journey. The road may wind with difficulty. At times you will feel abandoned, unseen, unheard, powerless. But here is the truth. The walls of fear and the sea of doubt are not the ultimate judges of your destiny. They are, instead, the very instruments designed to reveal where your trust truly lies. In the valley of affliction, when the weight presses down, our flesh recoils. It cries out for relief, rescue, for immediate cessation. But often the answer is not swift. Often it is stillness. Often it is a call to yield, to submit our trembling hands and calloused hearts to a reality that defies sight. Where we expect deliverance in the storm's eye, oftentimes we are met with still waters and soft assurance. That is the moment. Do you retreat within, or do you let go? Do not shrink back when your soul trembles at the thought of sorrow. Do not build a fortress of self-reliance, brick upon brick, for the mind of our flesh is fickle and feeble. It promises safety and familiarity, yet shatters when tested. Do not seek solace in what is seen. Instead, keep your gaze on the holy and the wise, on the eternal counsel that formed worlds and holds the winds and waves in his hand. The storms come, and when they do, they strip you bare. They reveal the illusions you've built of autonomy, of control, of self-made righteousness. In this rawness, a new way emerges, one that does not depend on the fallible self, but on that which is unshakable. The courage to say, I do not know what comes next, but I know who holds tomorrow. To say with bleeding honesty, I am weak, finite, broken, but I choose to rely. Trust is not escapism. It is not resignation. It is not a blind leap. It is fierce, bold, relentless. It demands that you stand firm on the greatest promises offered to mortal hearts, promises that transcend your pain, pluck you from your pit, guide your faltering feet onto a road not yet revealed. When fear whispers that this suffering will break you, answer, better to break in the hands of the immortal than to remain whole in my own. When reason screams that you are forsaken, retort, if I cannot see you, I will believe. When the world declares that control is an illusion, smile and say, I have wagered everything on you. In the midst of the tempest, prayer becomes your sword, your shield, your breath. Not the hurried word in fear, but the steady, intentional devotion that says, I will remain until the morning comes or you move. Prayer that persists through dark hours, that refuses to be silenced by groaning lungs or blurred vision. Trust does not eliminate suffering, but it reshapes it. It does not promise ease, but it guarantees purpose. Though the storm breaks branches and floods fields, it also brings rain that invigorates. What lies beneath the floods? Bedrock sanctified by suffering, heart humbled by hope, character forged in fire, beauty birthed from brokenness. The storms of shame, when past transgressions rise like waves to consume your identity, do not define you. Your moment of greatest failure can become your defining hour of redemption when you glance beyond your guilt to find the only one whose mercy does not run dry, not to excuse, but to renew, not to ignore, but to transform, not to pretend you are unblemished, but to embrace cleansing that washes deeper than regrets. The storms of uncertainty, when the path ahead is obscured and your heart is heavy with indecision, are opportunities for trust to walk not by sight, but by the promise of enduring providence. You are not destined for aimless wandering. There is a shepherd's voice whispering stillness, guiding lamb-like feet into pastures beyond what you imagined. The storms of loneliness, when voices fall silent, hands withdraw, and even the skies seem mute, invite a radical trust that you are never truly abandoned. In the core of your unloved hours, there is an abiding presence, closer than breath, more constant than your heartbeat, resilient, steadfast, unyielding. When every shore is distant and every companion is gone, you stand on eternal ground. If your storm is one of broken trust in men, rebuild upon a foundation not of mortal clay, but of divine constancy. If it is a storm of loss, let it reveal the value of what remains, unseen inheritance, secure identity, eternal purpose. If it is a storm of failure, allow it to show you not the truth of your shame, but the height of mercy and the depth of reconciliation. Trust is not found in avoiding storms, but in thriving because of them. The trials are not punishments, but petitions to surrender control. They are not barriers, but portals into a trust that outlives grief, transcends doubt, and breeds endurance. They refine, test, uproot, expose, terrify, but through them arises a sturdier faith. Behind every gale is an unwavering word. Behind every lightning strike, a steady covenant. Behind every crashing wave, there is a steadfast call to rest, not in ease, but in certainty, not in comfort, but in purpose, not in what you can see and explain, but in what you know through conviction birthed in suffering. The measure of your faith is not what happens when it's easy, it's what stands when it's hard. The character of your trust is not revealed in silence, but in shouting, I choose you even when you seem silent. The depth of your hope is not measured by sunshine, but by how you keep your knees when the storm clouds gather. Let your heart echo the soul of the ancients, though you slay me, yet will I trust. Not because of naivety, but because of certainty, not because of ease, but because of knowledge that the refinery is often hotter than the fire. Not because of pretense, but because of hardened faith that knows. Though flesh may fail, the rock endures forever. In the storm, do not seek to escape. Stand in it, endure it, embrace the stripping. Let it reveal your need and point you to the answer. Let it expose the idols you've hidden in fame, comfort, affection, predictability. Let it draw you into a place where your knees touch the ground and your soul lifts to the unseen. There is something fierce and sacred about a soul that trusts in the storm, something terrifying to fear and triumphant to foes, something that will outlast empires and light the next dark age. Trust. Not in yourself, not in the world, not in the fleeting and the fragile. Trust in the unseen. Place your hand in the hand that will not release. Stand brave amid the raging tide. Let your faith speak so clearly that even the heavens stand in awe. And so, walk forward, not with trembling anticipation for relief, but with hearts ablaze with determination, to trust, come what may, to rest in promises though the world shakes, to live so that when someone else's storm arrives, they will see not a face of fear, but a light unextinguished, hope unbroken, trust refined and triumphant. The storm reveals the depth and authenticity of our faith, stripping away self-reliance and illusions, pressing us to fully depend on God. Trust in God does not mean escape from pain, but rather the strength to stand and grow amid trials, knowing there is purpose in the pain. In the silence, fear, and uncertainty, persistent prayer and wholehearted surrender become the means by which we cling to God's promises. Every trial, loss, or fear becomes an instrument of refinement, exposing idols and guiding the believer to deeper intimacy and unwavering trust in the unchanging God. True trust in God is forged in the fire of suffering. When the fierce winds of adversity lash against the soul, true trust is discovered, tested, not in the gentle breeze of comfort, but on the anvil of affliction. It's easy to profess trust when life flows with clarity, when doors open smoothly, when relationships are harmonious. At those times, words of faith are simple and our confidence seems secure, but that kind of trust is unrefined, childlike, and as fragile as glass. It shatters at the first hint of hardship. True trust, by contrast, is tempered in the crucible of suffering, and it emerges not only resilient but radiant. Think of the crucible in which metals are purified, vessel heated to unbearable intensity, where impurities rise to the surface and are drawn away. So too does suffering act upon the soul. When pain presses in, it heats the core of our hearts, exposing the hidden places we never knew were alloyed. Self-reliance bubbles to the top, pride cracks, control freaks its way into our prayers, and fear, and sometimes rage, resides just below the surface. It is in the searing flames of life's trials that every fleck of wood, hay, or stubble is burned away, until at last we discover what's left, gold. Through suffering, God reveals the idols we cling to. In prosperity, we worship comfort. In favor, we worship adoration. In control, we worship ourselves. The storm unravels these lies. It reveals that we have trusted in the shifting sand of circumstances, not in the immutable rock. It shows us that our foundation is not as sure as we thought, and only when we awaken, sometimes abruptly, to say, "I have no ground beneath me but you," does the distillation of real trust begin. Consider the sorrow that is inexplicable, the child lost, the relationship fractured beyond repair, the diagnosis that changes everything. You wake up and the world you knew has collapsed. In the desperation that follows, you can either redirect your heart to bargain, demand, seek comfort, righteousness, or you can unclench your fist and let go of everything except the bare truth. No matter what else fails, I will believe you. That kind of surrender is the crucible in action, and out of it emerges trust unshakable, trust that cannot be extinguished by circumstance. This is the faith that Proverbs 3 described, not leaning on understanding, but acknowledging in all ways. Trust becomes the pathway to direction clear. Suffering proclaims loudly the folly of our own wisdom. When we hit rock bottom, every plan, every bargaining chip we carried becomes meaningless, and the silent realization dawns. We are utterly incapable. We cannot produce tomorrow. We cannot even keep today's breath. That helplessness ought to drive despair, but for those who have eyes to see, it is the moment grace breaks in. It whispers, "You do not know, and that's why you must lean on me." This trust born in suffering does not eradicate questions. It refrains from false certainty. It does not gloss over the agony with platitudes. It stands firm amid doubt. Abundance of tears becomes the altar, and trust, raw, trembling, incomplete, becomes the offering. One day you cry out, "Why me?" The next day, "Not my will." Soon your heart settles, and your groaning becomes petition, your sorrow intimacy, your questioning communion. You stop orchestrating the prayer. You start praying with no concern for the outcome and no assurance of deliverance. You pray like a child falls asleep in its parents' arms, with trust not in being understood, but in being held. In that place, promises that once felt distant become alive. The covenant whispered in ancient words becomes an anchor for your soul. That which you rehearsed as doctrine becomes the breathing foundation on which you stand. I will never leave you or forsake you. All things work together for good to those who love me. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. These are not platitudes. They are coordinates for the soul lost in the labyrinth of suffering. They are nails you can drive through each hand, each foot of your pain, until you find that He is enough. Enough not to remove the suffering, but to absorb it, so it does not destroy. Affliction can brutalize your flesh, but it cannot pulverize your hope when lodged in His hands. Yet there is struggle, great struggle, for trust born in this furnace is no plywood helmet. It is tempered steel. You emerge stronger, but not unaffected. The scars remain. They become a permanent memorial of mercy. You bear them not as reminders of defeat, but as banners of deliverance. They say, I was afraid, I was despised, I felt broken, but here I stand, refined and confirmed. In the ashes of suffering, trust becomes testimony. It ripples outward in compassion, in solidarity with the suffering of others, a kindness only those who have suffered can truly offer. Faith without test is brittle. It is like a vine that never endures frost. It grows easily in comfort, but cannot withstand the winter. Suffering is frost. It is cold and cruel. It stabs through flesh. But where it lands on faith, forged rightly, it does not kill the vine. It solidifies the root deeper, prepares the bud's bloom. The soul stiffens, not to defend itself, but because it stands on solid rock. It becomes resolute and not easy to shake, not because it looks strong, but because its strength resides outside of itself. This trust born in suffering also becomes ministry. When God allows your storm, He does not intend only to build your faith. He intends to use your faith to build others. Authentic trust, cultivated through suffering, speaks with authority in dark places. It says, I walked where you walk. I know what it is to be crushed. But in that crushing I found hands that did not let me go. It reminds others that in their storm they are not abandoned, that their tears are not unnoticed, that their trembling hands need not grasp for certainty, but may instead grip the unseen. This kind of trust also humbles. No one leans on their own strength and issues readership. So humility is inseparable from trust born in fire. It doesn't boast in deliverance. It marvels that once it stood and was given the ability to stand again. It knows it lives not by its own doing, but by the pattern of God's mercy. It is daily aware of propensity to wander back to idols of stability and affirmation, and it clings to repentance like a man clings to a lifeline. The refining process does not end with one storm. Each new trial revives the refinery. You can mistake your former battles for completion, yet when a fresh wave strikes, you may find latent self-reliance or old wounds flaring. But because trust is established, the recovery is shorter. Faith has muscle memory. The prayers you prayed in past fires return to your lips. The truths once burned into your heart become a familiar track on which hope runs again. The cry once whispered in darkness becomes the song that anchors the next night. All this leads to a life of freedom, not license, but liberty. Real trust won't enslave you to fear. It won't demand proof. It won't manipulate outcomes or people. It rests, it waits, it worships. It does not run from suffering. It dares to say, bring it on, not because it craves suffering, but because knowing the heart of the potter, it is unmoved by the threat of the kiln. Why fear the furnace when you know you are in the hands of one who has already walked through it, refined not once, but 3 times hotter, and stood unmoved. Scripture recounts heroes of old who chose trust in darkest hours. Joseph in prison, the Shulamite in exile, Habakkuk in dread, Daniel in lion's den, not because they understood the path, but because they were convinced of the promise, keeper beyond their pain, and they emerged not only victorious, but as beacons. Their words still echo through time and reconcile trembling hearts. Do not fear. Though he slay me, yet will I hope. My flesh may fail, but God is the strength of my heart. These are not lies to comfort the weak. They are truths that comfort the crushed. Then Christ Jesus himself trod this road, not with a light touch. It was agony, the park of patient, the cry of abandonment. He knew deeply, fully, the furnace's heat. He trusted because he had embraced God's heart before the fire. And because he did, the cross became not defeat, but victory, and the tomb an entry to forever. Trust him on that. When we suffer, it is not unknown, it is not pointless. It is a stage for himself, not for our glory, but for his. When we suffer, we enter into his story, and our trust becomes a strand in his tapestry, woven through sorrow, through redemption, leading to resurrection. Yes, trust forged in suffering carries scars, but they are marks of identity, not shame. They say, I belong here. This trial was meant to teach me dependence. This pain was meant to loosen my grip on self. This loss was meant to draw out whispers of reliance. My frailty is not failure. It is the canvas upon which his strength is displayed. My tears are not dissent. They are prayers in liquid form. My questions are not rebellion. They are honest cries for more of his presence. This trust also gives peace, not as the world gives, but as a soldier resting before the march. It is not the peace of safety, but the peace of presence. In the night watches, when sleep is scant, when doubt prowls like a lion, the soul that has been refined knows the whispers by heart. It can say, even with tears unshed, you are with me, you will not leave me, and that settles the storm. Not the outward waves, but the inward sea. In that calm, trust is no longer a choice. It is the air we breathe, the posture of our life. A trust forged in suffering also becomes a door. With it comes empathy. That heart can enter chambers of brokenness and speak to battered souls. Not with thetes of one who has only observed, but of one who has been lost and found. That voice says, I have known the valley. It's not too deep. It is an open hand, not a closed fist. It says, I won't fix you. I'll stand beside you. It becomes a channel of compassion that flows from rock. Solid dependence, not from self-sufficiency. You become a desert spring, rare, necessary, pure. In suffering, trust goes public. It does not remain hidden behind private musings. It speaks in soft confession, in broken song, in extended arms. It says, I was afraid, I was betrayed, I was powerless, but I am found, forgiven, and upheld. It becomes a banner of hope, not just for self, but for others. It is prophetic. It is resistance. It is proof that suffering is neither final nor fatal, because the one who holds us is greater than the one who tries to destroy us. This trust also changes our posture in worship. No longer is worship the cadence of ease and ornate language. It becomes tears, lifting hands that barely open, voice that cracks, sincerity that demands heaven to lean in close. It is not art, it is authenticity. It cries out louder than any melody able to carry it. It is worship unadorned, unfenced, free, because that trust not only survives the furnace, it calls the furnace a furnace of grace. And in the end, trust forged in suffering becomes treasure. It outlasts wealth, health, social standing. It cannot be confiscated. It is a treasure stored in heavens, secured not by walls of men, but by covenant unbreakable. And when life's final storm, death, stirs its mightiest winds, that trust stands unpliable, it cries out, I know whom I have trusted. I may not know all the hows, the when, the whys, but I know him. There suffering ends, but trust does not. It blooms into glory, so may we welcome the refining. May we choose trust as our posture, when the storm is visible and when it is not. May we let our pain reveal what props we have erected in secret, and let each crack in the foundation guide us to hand it all over. Let us surrender to the process, not to escape the storm, but to be made resilient in it. Let us walk this way, in brokenness, trusting, in sorrow, praising, in doubt, choosing faith again over and over, until the fire burns out and what is left is only gold. Faith is not the absence of storms, but endurance through them. It is not a shield that deflects every hardship, but the deep resolve to walk through the tempest with steady steps. In the quiet fields of comfort, calling it faith is easy. When thunder roars and winds seem intent on uprooting every conviction, that's when the substance of faith is tested. Endurance does not mean unbroken or unfeeling. It means refusing to derail under the force of suffering, refusing to trade trust for certainty, refusing to surrender before the final sunrise arrives. Storms come in countless forms: the hidden ache of chronic pain, the betrayal that cuts deeper than words, the loss that reshapes life's trajectory, the disappointment so persistent and sour it swallows hope. These are not inconveniences. They are elemental forces seeking to rearrange hearts, to redefine beliefs, to weigh our souls in the balance. And endurance is not born in the absence of such forces. It is carved out within them. It is the choice to stand again when your knees tremble, to speak truth when your tongue falters, to believe tomorrow has value when today bleeds into night. But what is endurance? It's not stubbornness rigged in pride. It's surrender done with eyes wide open. It's acknowledging that you are not stronger than your situation, but clinging all the more to the one who is. It's the posture of a man standing amid waves, not because the waves will cease, but because his anchor is deeper than the seafloor. That anchor is not human ingenuity, moral performance, or fleeting optimism. It is the unseen promise that carries weight even when evidence looms absent. When faith carries you forward through suffering, your posture changes. You move from grasping to pressing. You move from questioning to petitioning. You move from bargaining for relief to pleading for grace. With each step forward, even when tears blur the path, endurance tests your ability to trust that the one who holds tomorrow is not careless with today. The body may weaken, the finances may plunge, the future may dissolve in mist, but the soul that endures whispers, "Still, I believe." Consider the ancient storms, the exiles, the persecutions, the famine, the loss of homeland, the death of loved ones. Those who endured did not claim they understood. They simply trusted. They moved when there was no clear way. They spoke when their voices trembled. They worshipped when their hearts were broken. They found, by decades of persistence, that faith grows not in ease, but in endurance. They discovered that walls do not bow to prayers of convenience, but storms do lift the hearts of those who persist. Storms do more than afflict. They reveal. They expose the idols we so carefully build, the idol of self-reliance, the idol of control, the idol of performance, the idol of comfort. When those idols break, faith that is built on them collapses, but the soul whose faith is rooted in something unseen remains. The storm does not change that foundation. It only uncovers what lies upon it. And those who stand through the storm, whose endurance holds fast in the shaking, become witnesses to something far greater than survival. They become beacons of a trustworthy God. Endurance transforms pain into purpose. When a body endures chronic illness, the heart can become a wellspring of compassion. When betrayal fractures every expectation, the soul may learn mercy of a higher order. When finances crumble, trust is honed on providence unseen. You will not escape storms, but you can become an instrument through them, teaching courage to another, modeling patience to the fearful, embodying hope to the despairing. Endurance is contagious because it is hope in action. Yet to endure, we must remain connected to the root of faith, daily discipline, intentional communion, truthful confession, persistent prayer. These are not methods to bypass suffering, they are lifelines through it. They remind our hearts that storms do not originate in the moment we feel them. They began long ago, on the day promises were spoken over us. Regular engagement with those promises, steeped in prayer and honest reflection, builds the muscle of faith, so that when the storm hits, our knees bend not in panic, but in deliberate trust. But endurance is costly. It demands you go without recourse to false comforts. It demands vulnerability in places that sting. It demands honesty when it's easier to write a script of unwavering confidence. It requires you to admit your tears, your fears, your small faith. That admission, however, is not weakness. It is the soil from which your endurance sprouts. If you are pretending all is well, you have forfeited the opportunity to endure with authenticity. The storm then wins because it has convinced you that you cannot share the burden. But if you carry your heart to someone who prays over you, who grieves with you, who believes for you, then endurance becomes communal, and hope finds a voice stronger than silence. In those moments when it all seems too much, endurance drags us back to the simplest truth. One step, one prayer, one breath. Just breathe. Breathe me through this storm. That whisper may be no more eloquent than the sound of your own heart, but it is suffused with faith. It is a memory of covenant, it is a defiance of despair, and it is enough, one breath at a time. There is also beauty in endurance. Think of the tree planted by streams of water. It stands strong through drought, for its roots run deep. Endurance makes a forest of battered souls, each marked by scars, each rooted in grace. They wear their endurance like crowns, not to boast of individual conquest, but to testify to the one whose power works through human weakness. They are not people who have escaped storms, but people who have walked through them. Their songs are not of triumph over pain, but of triumph in the midst of it. This endurance is also forward, looking. It's not merely surviving, it's believing in a harvest you cannot yet see. Faith that endures whispers in the night. This is not the finale. It envisions joy arising from sorrow, growth springing from defeat, character birthed from loss. It anticipates the day when the bruises will heal. But even if they do not, the soul will still stand, like a warrior whose armor holds not because it has never been struck, but because it was reforged on the battlefield. We cannot choose our storms, we cannot prevent the rain, but we can choose how we walk through them. Faith that endures chooses this path, refusal to curse the storm, willingness to learn from its pressure, resolve to speak truth in the shadows, readiness to carry hope not just for self, but for others. This endurance does not guarantee ease. It guarantees presence, to suffer well, to stand, to love, to believe in the eyes of doubt, under the weight of grief, in the valley of confusion. In the end, faith that endures, faith that walks through storms, is the clearest evidence that what we believe is not merely a theory or a feeling, but a person who stands beside us. When everything around us falls, endurance becomes our declaration, I am not alone. It echoes louder than our pain, you will not triumph. And through it, a quiet revolution begins, one soul at a time, proving that in a broken world, there is a broken people whose faith still lives, still stands, still endures. Prayer and surrender are weapons in the darkness. In the depths of our anguish, when hope feels as distant as the stars, these two, the raw cry of prayer and the open palm of surrender, become our only lifelines. They are not sentimental notions, but spiritual armaments wielded precisely when the spiritual sky feels blackened. They pierce the gloom not by escaping it, but by meeting it head on with faith that speaks louder than fear. Prayer begins in the silence of longing. It starts not with eloquence, but with brokenness. When we have nothing left to offer, prayer becomes the vessel into which our wounded hearts pour their small trust. It's in the dark watches, when sleep flees and the night presses its weight upon the chest, that prayer's faint flicker defies the blackness. It is a cry born of dependence, not demand. It does not say, "Change this." It trembles, "Please stand with me." In that plea, power stirs, the power to endure, to see beyond, to hope when sight fails. But prayer alone can become a rudderless cry if surrender does not accompany it. Without surrender, prayer becomes negotiation. We tug at spiritual reins, bargaining for comfort or control. We offer faith in return for rescue, but when prayer is bound to surrender, it recognizes, "Not my will, but yours." In that posture, prayer is no longer transactional, it is transformational. It becomes not a language to influence heaven, but a channel through which heaven influences us. Surrender, then, becomes the posture of warriors. It is not passivity, it is courage disguised. It takes greater strength to let go of control than to cling. It is refusing to fix, to manipulate things into peace. It is instead choosing faith over certainty, obedience over comfort, trust over crazy striving. In surrender, we admit that the story is bigger than our pain, that the path may be hidden, but the guide is not, that the hands beyond our vision have not loosened their hold. In the darkness, prayer rings and surrender stands. Together they mark a soldier's ground, not retreat, not capitulation, but stance. To pray for light in the dark, and to surrender to the current of a coastline unknown. To say, "I don't know where this storm goes, but I will follow." Prayer invokes presence. Surrender receives release. Prayer speaks, surrender listens. Prayer is the cry, surrender is the stillness, and within this rhythm the battle is waged, and won, not in visible signs, but in quiet confidence. When sorrows surge, prayer becomes a shield. It repels lies that whisper abandonment, defeat, and meaninglessness. When prayers rise in tears, they sift truth through sorrow. They say, "Even if this pain kills me, I will call." And that call is remembered in eternity. When circumstances scream you are alone, prayer declares, "I am held." When your mind hastens to conclusions that your heart cannot stand, surrender grips hope and refuses the conclusion. It rejects the tyranny of doubt. It says, "If you do not deliver me today, it is still well with my soul." Such weapons are forged in intimacy. You cannot wield prayer and surrender apart from relationship. They are the limbs of communion. If you are not talking to the guide of the unseen every morning, your words in the darkness will come broken. If you are not daily surrendering to tasks, to time, to things small, then surrendering amid suffering becomes impossible. These are not tactics to be stored. They are trades to be practiced. They are habits to be formed when skies are clear. So when they darken, you will not fumble. Prayer and surrender together form the posture of calibration. The heart aligns not with outcomes but with the giver. You pray for rescue, but when rescue does not come, you remind yourself, rescue was always secondary, the goal was you. You pray for a path out, but if no path comes, you yield to the one who named it good. Prayer and surrender fasten us not to deliverance, but to the deliverer. They make our souls less outcome dependent, more posture dependent. There is an intensity in dark room prayer birthed by surrender. It sounds like groaning or whispering or brief words that carry a lifetime of longing. It sounds like lament. I am overwhelmed. I do not understand. But those become lines of defiance against darkness, because they are spoken upright before the one whose presence they confess. Even in despair, prayer says, "You are." Even in helplessness, surrender says, "I am yours," and that posture cracks the strongholds of night. It shifts the battle from what you feel to what is real. Prayer and surrender also reframe suffering. They do not deny it. They confront it, but they refuse to be victims. Prayer says, "Speak into this." Surrender says, "Use it." They say, this any not by chance moment was never wasted, because you are working. They turn darkness into theater where grace is seen, where resilience grows, where hope is tempered. They do not cancel the pain. They convert it into purpose. Consider the earliest of survivors, the psalmist in lament, the captive jotting down truths in exile, the mother standing over a quiet casket. Their prayers were not words of doctrine. They were fractured fragments, night cries, tears made audible. Yet they surrendered their right to fix, and they found a fidelity that no pain could uproot. They found solidarity in loss. They found voice in the silence. They found presence in what felt empty. Prayer and surrender together became their lifelines. In the blackness, prayer summons memory. It invokes past deliverances, reminds us of covenants kept, revives our recognition of mercies not because we understood, but because He was faithful. It builds expectation, not because circumstances allow it, but because He declares it. It says, "This darkness is not blank. You are here. This ache is not ignored. You hear. This storm is not submerged. You still hold. But without surrender it falls flat, because we still clutch. Why? When? How?" Surrender answers those questions with silence. And in that silence, faith roots deeper. These weapons also stand together. Prayer lifted when eyes can no longer see, and surrender whispered when courage falters. Prayer withers without surrender's renewal. Surrender dissipates without prayer's cry. They are two arms held wide, forging a stance that resists the onslaught. We misunderstand when we imagine them only as rescue tools. They are not fire alarms. They are refining heat. Their task is not simply to get us out, but to make us of the stuff that endures. They shape our souls to carry sorrow with dignity, to breathe under pressure, to worship through weakness. They teach us endurance, and in endurance lies victory. And victory does not always come by changing the circumstances. It often comes by changing the soldier. The victory is a heart that is taught to trust without seeing, to rest without escaping, to love without understanding. It is victory when tears are not the opposite of faith, but the language of it. When surrender is not a sign of giving up, but of giving over. When prayer is not a list of demands, but a cry of dependence. Prayer and surrender unlock a resolve to say, "Let the storm drive me closer to the heart of the one I crave." A resolve to say, "Better to walk in the dark with open hands than to cling to false security." A resolve to say, "Choose present intimacy over future explanations." It's not easy, it hurts, it feels unwise, but it forms a will stronger than grief, more vital than hope, more deferred than despair. Warriors are not born, they are forged in battle. Prayer and surrender are forge and flame. They burn away complacency, they reshape perspective, they harden resolve, they light endurance. They say, "You cannot keep me here unless I allow it, and in the waiting I'll meet you." They say, "This is not the end, it is the refining place." So cry out when the night is long. Whisper surrender when your will trembles. Speak even through tears. Does it change things? Maybe, but it will change you. It will carve out courage. It will craft reliance. It will cultivate a faith, not contextual, but covenantal. It will grow trust that does not demand explanation, but rests in devotion. It will preserve something precious, that you know Him not only in miracles, but in darkness, The storm is not a curse, but a tool. It comes not to shame, but to shape, not to punish, but to purify. It may overturn tables, uproot certainties, shatter comfort. Yet beneath its roar lies purpose. Storms are God's draftsmanship, revealing the imperfections in our hearts and the battered foundations of our trust. When the lightning flashes, it does not only illuminate weakness, it magnifies the canvas of His artistry, exposing the cracks through which His grace may enter. In calm skies, we float on superficial faith. We sing of trust when the wind is gentle. We stand firm when our feet are dry. But when the storm arrives, our foundations tremble. Beneath the fray, truth is often the casualty. We trade perseverance for panic, hope for explanation, surrender for control. Yet in the eye of that same tempest lies a brilliant opportunity. It is a chance to remember who we are, whose we are, and what we truly trust. Storms awaken our hearts. They hiss the lies stored in our souls. You are not enough. Everything is falling apart because of you. You can't bear this. The wind shrieks that our hopes were foolish, our vision naive. But storms also call us to remember deeper truths, that what seems broken may be a masterpiece in progress, that what feels lost may be a treasure hidden, that what appears as ruin may redirect to purpose. They call us to stand, not because the storm has ceased, but because the architect stands behind the waters, holding every raindrop in his hand. In the grinding of the gale, storms dismantle the idols we've built. Wealth, comfort, acclaim, predictability, these foundations yield before the press. No longer can we rely on our bank balance when markets crash. No longer can we rest in familiarity when schedules dissolve. No longer can we build hope on the applause of others when voices go silent. The storm strips us to the bare rock, revealing whether we stand on ourselves or on covenant. It is the great expose of false securities. But the storm is also a teacher. It instructs us in humility. We learn the hollowness of our plans, the limits of our control, the vastness of the unseen. We learn to pray with fewer words and deeper groans. We learn to cling not to ideas but to presence. Suffering peels away layers of our mortality, yet in that peeling we discover margin for mercy. In the rawness of heartache, we see the clearness of grace. In the ache of loneliness, we hear closer whispers. In the ache of wanting answers, we feel the wideness of fidelity. And in storms, we learn endurance. Not the brittle endurance of grit, but the steady endurance of roots that have found water in the dark. It does not come overnight. It comes with each refusal to abandon, each quiet dawn after a broken night, each prayer offered again without guarantee of rescue. It comes when thousands of little decisions shape the soul, to trust, to wait, to obey, to humble. In the accumulation of those small acts, faith grows not in spite of the storm, but through it. The storm becomes the gardener, not the vandal. Storms also become bridges in the fellowship of suffering. When one soul endures hardship, another empathizes. Pain becomes a bond that overshadows politics, performance, prestige. We become less competitive and more communal. We speak of wounds, not for blame, but for bonding. We build hospitals of mercy, not stages of boast. Our shared tears become wells of compassion. Our shared endurance becomes an anthem. None is safe until all are home. In suffering, we learn to run together, not toward a promise of rescue, but toward the promise of presence. Further, storms remind us that our story is not our script. We like to plan, to plot, to anticipate. We create outlines and imagine applause. But when the storm rewrites the storyboard, we discover that greatness is not in the unfolding of our plans, but in the display of His presence. It is not in our success, but in our dependence. When our narratives fracture, grace finds new entry. Redemption steps through the cracks, and what could have been a stumbling block becomes a stepping stone. Storms also awaken praise that cannot be imitated. When the waters surged and Elijah slept, his servant feared, but the man of God answered not with panic, but with rest, because he knew there was a still small voice beyond the storm. When our hearts know that, praise rises, not praise for rescue yet to come, but praise for the one who is with us in the fray. Our voices falter in sunshine. They shine brightest in the deluge, because praise in the storm is witness, proof that God is not distant, but before, beside, behind, under, and within. In the middle of all this, storms train us in faith that fears not darkness, for we become carriers of light. We learn that brightness is not absence of darkness, but presence of power. We discover that the storm cannot snuff out a glow that rests in covenant. We find that when everything else is stripped, our trust in the unseen shines most clearly. We become living signal fires in a world shrouded by weather and by foes. In that city lit on a hill, they do not ask, "Who are you?" but know by the radiance of endurance and trust. Storms shape our view of eternity. They remind us that this life is temporary and that pain is finite. We see how transient health is, how time wavers, how resources end. But we also glimpse what lies beyond the sky, unfading inheritance, unshakable city, presence eternal. The wreckage of earth becomes a stark contrast to the richness of forever, and we learn to evaluate this world by its transience, not by its appearance. We learn that storms matter less than the one who rides upon them. All the while, storms accentuate the covenant of God. When we hide behind our self-made walls, we experience our narrowness. When we are battered, we glimpse the breadth of His compassion. When we see ourselves as helpless, we feel the height of His help. Storms preach to our soul, "You belong," not because of what we have done, but because of who He is. The memory of those storms becomes a dossier of redemptive mercy, proof that neither wind nor wave can sever the bond. So when the storm arrives, unplanned, uninvited, unwanted, let it not be the signal of abandonment. Let it be the call to stand. Let it be the hammer that fractures false resolves. Let it be the fire that forges endurance. Let it be the night that draws forth deeper prayer. Let it be the pressure that crafts beauty. Let it be the breaking that births intimacy. Let it be the weight that redirects wonder. Let it be the loss that leads to gain. Let it be the chaos beneath which order grows. Let it be the desert in which spring hides. Let it be the darkness in which light stands out. Storms do not define us, they refine us. They do not uproot us. They expose the depth of our roots. They do not destroy our story. They rewrite it, and if we let them, they will make us more honest, more humble, more compassionate, more resilient. They will make our faith less theoretical and more experiential. They will make our praise less performance and more surrender. They will make our worship less routine and more desperate. They will make our hope less naive and more sure. And in the end, storms will become our testimonies. When voices ask us why we are not shaken, we will say, "Because the one who called the storms by name is mobilized in our weakness." When they ask how we stand, we will say, "Because our feet are planted not on this shifting ground, but on the promise of covenant." When they ask what saved us, we will say, "Not the iron of our strength, but the mercy that carried us through the gale." Let every storm be met not with fear, but with surrender. Let every wave be an invitation to trust deeper. Let every thunderclap be a reminder that power rides upon the chaos. Let every lightning bolt remind us the storm is not final, but is saturated with possibility. Let the storm be not a curse, but the calling to stand.